Hi, here's a quick video demonstrating the negative revenue forecasting and negative revenue recognition. This was the final model that we needed to test with Shelby. The situation is I've got a project. It's a fixed fee project. I've currently recognized the project through November of 2015. We've recognized $11,440 worth of revenue on this project. Right now, based on the hours I've got scheduled to work, so we have an estimated complete hours of 500. Um, that against that's 120 hours that we've actually worked, 380 hours scheduled. That would show me at 24% complete, which would mean that if I were to go and forecast revenue right now and recognize revenue right now with the number, I would be able to recognize the difference between the 12,446 that we've earned and the 11,440 that we've recognized. So let's just go ahead and do that. I'm not actually going to commit the revenue recognition. First, I'm going to go into the forecast and click Generate Forecast. And what we're going to see here is the project's going to go out there, and based off of the hours we've got scheduled for, and if I were to show this, let me hide this back up. So right now I've got hours scheduled. No hours in December, although I'm forecasting in December. I've got 84 hours in January and 296 hours in February. Our revenue forecast is going to come back with, right, so it's going to be a total amount that we're going to forecast is going to be $1,000 in February, in December, 8,700 in January, and 30,000 in February. So we get the 40,000 that we have remaining on the project. But the $1,000 that we're going to see in December, that comes from the most recent recognizing. So if I come in and actually get new data to recognize revenue, we're going to see that we're going to recognize in December the difference between what we've actually recognized to date and what we've actually earned. So that should be that 1,000. The forecasting is saying that we're going to recognize 1,000 in December, and then. And the reason I'm saying that now is because I haven't actually added any new hours in December. So right now I'm recognizing what I'm forecasting based on the same number of actual hours worked. You'll notice that to get this example to work, I've got no scheduled hours in December. So what that means is that on the project, if I have no more scheduled hours and I do no more work in December, then this revenue earned of 12,446 is the number that we will recognize at the end of the project. And that's the difference. In the forecast, it's going to calculate what the revenue will be at the end of December. But again, no hours scheduled in December. So therefore, what I've actually got as revenue earned on my project will be the revenue earned at the end of December. So going and looking at this, we should now see that there's the $1,006 that we're going to recognize this period. So previously recognized 1140, total will be 12,446. That's what we could recognize. Now, that's perfect. It ties out nicely. It's exactly what we need to see. So if I come back over and look at my forecast, this revenue forecast, again, we changed it so that we're going to get one number per month, and this represents the amount that we're going to recognize in that month. If I just real quickly jump into that project, let's go look at these revenue forecast transactions because there's another change that we made here. When I look at the 2015 revenue forecast transaction for the labor, there's the 1006 that we're seeing on our revenue forecast screen. And if I drill into that, what we've done is we've also added onto this some fields that we added, custom fields. So in November for this forecast, we're gonna forecast $1,006. Well, the hours at the start of the period were 120, and because this is the first month of the forecast, which is December, I can go back to the project and get my baseline. So I had 120 hours at the beginning of December. So that's what was the hours that were recognized or accrued on the project or approved on the project at the start of December. So then I worked 0 hours, so I had no hours scheduled to work. So that's why my hours at the end of the period match my hours at the beginning of the period. Again, looking at the planner, I've got no hours scheduled. So that's why this model works, or this example works. So that'll give me a 24% complete at the end of the period. So that means that the revenue forecasted at the startup period, this came again from the project. In this case, I got that $11,440 on the project. So since this is the first month of the forecast, The 1,006 is what I get by taking 24% multiplied by the 51,000 of labor revenue, and I now get a forecast at the end of the period of 12,446. So my net revenue that I'm going to recognize is 1,006. Again, that's what shows on the revenue recognition screen, and that's what shows for the month in my forecast. Now, of course, my forecast, if I were to go look at the next month, so if I look at the January 2016, so when I come into my revenue forecast transaction and I go to the 2016 transaction, now we build off of what we saw. So down here when I go into January, so I'm recognizing the 8712 in January. Well, where does that come from? Well, hours at the start of the period were 120, so that's the number that carried over from December. Hours in period are 84, so I'm forecasting 84 hours that are going to be worked in January. So I get an hour at the end of the period of 204 against my 500. That gives me 40% complete. So our forecast is saying at the end of at the end of January 2016, right now, will be 40% complete. So that represents 40% of 51,860 is 8,712. So revenue forecasted at the start of the period is 12,446. Forecast at the end, add the 8712, we're going to have 21,158 cumulative revenue at the end of February. Taking it one step farther, if I then go and look at this 30,000 in November, if I go back to my revenue forecast transaction, so let me jump back up. Now when I look at the oops, I'm sorry, this is 20, that's the wrong one. So if I go back up to the 2016 transaction, so there's the 8,000 that we did in January. Let's look at this 30,000 in February. Where does this come from? So this comes from the fact that I start with 204 hours. Remember, I have 204 hours at the end of January. So my start of February is going to start with 204. I'm scheduling 296 hours in February, so I get it 500 even at the end of the period. Gets me 100% revenue complete, so I now get my 5186, which is what it's going to be. But since I previously recognized 21,000, I'm net the revenue I will be recognizing in February will be 30,701. So we actually are carrying these numbers over month to month on the forecast. So all looks good. Let's now make this a negative forecast. So what ends up happening for a negative forecast? Let's go in and let's put a couple more hours in February. What that's going to do is it's going to change the percent complete on the project. So if I go into February, and let me just put in, let's say, 20 hours a day here just to bump the hours up. And I hit save. We're now going to go from 552 to 652. When I refresh my project's EAC, which I think should happen automatically, but I'll do it. Okay, now when I come down here, now we see my estimate at complete hours went from 500 to 600. I just put 100 extra hours in February. The key here is that my percent complete went from 24 to 20%, which means my revenue earned went from that 12,000 that I had at 24% down to 10,000. Notice the key here is 10,372 is less than 11,440. So now when I come into my forecast screen and I hit generate forecast, it's going to rebuild my forecast. What we should see is we're going to see a negative amount of revenue that we have to recognize in the month of December to get us back to having, because remember, I've got no hours. I still have no hours scheduled in December. So that means that my December forecast is going to be the 0 hours in December. So I'll be getting a December number that will be based off of that 20%. So here I get a negative 1,068 that I have to recognize in December. That after December, what I'm going to end up having then is going to will get me back to the $10,037 of revenue earned. If I go and actually look at the revenue forecast transaction at this point, let me go find the December forecast transaction line. I go into my December labor. Here's the negative 1,000. What we see is that, hey, I started the start of the month had 120 hours. I didn't have any hours scheduled for the month, so my end is 120. So my percent complete becomes 20. So 20% of 51,860 is going to be 10,372. Well, since I started, which is what I have to have at the end of the forecast period, since I started with 11,440, I'm going to have a negative 1,068 in this period that I'm going to have to recognize. Now the big question is, if I came in right now and I recognized revenue for December, I'm going to hit get new data again. We're going to see that if this trues out, if this will hold up. Remember, we get $51,860 of labor revenue. The previous recognized is going to stay at $11,440, but to recognize to date is going to have to be negative to get us to the total, right? And the total in this case is going to be 10,372. Retrieve, and there it is. There's the negative 1,068 that we'll have to recognize in our revenue recognition. So it does work out. I don't know how often it will be that we'll end up having a lower percent complete at the end of a month. And also, in order to recognize it, in our case, we'd have 0 hours scheduled for this month, or such a low number of hours forecasted or scheduled for this month. But the system now can handle the key parts are that we now have our revenue forecast is going to be 1 record per month, not 1 per EVA. So you have 1 record per month, and then this shows you the revenue that you're going to recognize in that month. If you want to see the details of where that came from, you can open up the revenue forecast transaction line, and you can see all the pieces that went into coming up with that number. The pieces being the hours that you'll have at the end of the period, the estimated hours on the project, the percent complete for the project, as it will be at the end of that forecast month. And then obviously you have the revenue that you recognized previously, and then the revenue you'll need to get to the end of the month. So I think we're all good to go.